So with the release of the new Shadowverse expansion came these pre-built decks, and I noticed that some people were wondering if they were worth it or not. So I'm going to attempt to answer that since I've had a chance to look at all of them. The first thing to note is that these have none of the new expansion in them. It's only standard and Darkness Evolve cards. Secondly, as it says right here, 500 crystals for the first purchase, 750 for each additional one, and you can do that maximum of 3 times a piece. So 500 crystals is roughly 10 bucks or 5 packs, and what you're getting in each of these is 5 golds and 2 legendaries. So from that standpoint, if you buy 5 packs, are you going to get that many golds and that many legendaries? No, you're not. So from that standpoint, it's a good deal. One thing to note though is that even though this says pre-built decks, these barely work. These are not, you're not going to be competitive with these. These are more of a blueprint for you to build off of. That's why you can buy them 3 times. And if you do buy them 3 times, you'll have more of a cohesive deck on your hands. So what do you get in these? You get an emblem, you get a sleeve, and you get 30 cards. And the emblem and the sleeve are going to be based off of the animated card that's in here, the animated legendary, which is obviously the one on the cover. So let's jump into the Forest Craft deck, and I'm going to go through and just quickly do a rundown of what's staple, what's not, is it worth it. So Rhinoceros is the first gold we come across, and that's a staple. You're more often than not going to want 3 of these. Elf Girl Lies is a staple. You're going to want 1 to 3. It depends on your deck. Robin Hood is not a staple. Most decks don't play it at all. It's not a terrible card, but it's not a staple. Grand Archer Selwyn is played probably even less than Robin Hood. And Elf Knight Cynthia is a staple. You'll probably want 2 to 3 of those. Ancient Elf is a staple. You're going to want 3. And Crystalia Teal, you're going to want 2 or 3. That's also a staple. And I'm basing this for the most part on the past season, not necessarily this one, because we still don't know what effect the new expansion is going to have on anything. But this looks to be basically like a mid-range forest deck, and if you bought this 3 times, you would probably have a pretty good mid-range forest deck, minus taking out a couple cards. Like I would take this out and I would take this out, but if you bought this one 3 times, you'd have your 3 Rhinoceros, you'd have your 3 Ancient Elves, 3 Crystalia Teals, and you'd be good to go. It's one of the only ones that I might actually consider buying 3 times if I was willing to just spend the money in the first place and Forest Craft was the direction I wanted to go. I think you'll actually end up having a pretty good deck in the end by doing that. Hour of the Banquet, this is the Swordcraft one. It's the only one that I've bought so far because I didn't have any Aurelias, and I only had, I think, 1 Sea Queen, so it kind of made sense to me to get this one. Let's look at the golds. We have White Paladin, which is like a semi-staple. Like, it's more for control decks. Some mid-range use it. Latham Vanguard Captain isn't a very great card. Nobody uses that. Alwita's Command used to be a staple. I heard that it's less effective than it was, thanks to some cards in the new expansion that have come out. But I still think it's probably going to end up in a lot of Swordcraft decks. I still think it's going to be staple territory, but we'll see. Front Guard General is a staple, particularly in control. And it also makes appearances in mid-range as well. Dragonute Charlotte is a good card, but it's not a staple. It's more of just like a card that maybe you want to play it, maybe you don't. It just depends on your play style, your deck. Sea Queen is a good legendary, and Aurelia is a very good legendary. So this one too, I would say, is worth it. As for the Rune Craft, this is basically trying to set you up to build a Dimension Shift deck. This isn't one that I would buy 3 times though, by any means. I would buy it once if that's the kind of deck I wanted to make, because let's look at the golds here. Time-Worn Mage Levi is a staple. First Curse is not a good card, so that's a poor choice for them, I think. Fire Chain is a staple in most Dimension Shift decks, although you only need one of them. Rhyme Wind is not a staple, but it's not bad. Some people use it, some people don't. Dimension Shift is the key card, obviously, in a Dimension Shift deck, and they give you one of them. You obviously want three of them. The two legendaries we have Mithril Golem and Merlin. Merlin, you want 2 to 3 of them typically, so that's a good card to have. But Mithril Golem, most Dimension Shift decks don't use these at all. So because you want to win by turn 7 or 8, turn 9 you're already kind of going a little too far, and its effect can save you, but there's just Dimension Shift decks are so condensely packed to begin with just what you need to cycle well, that this is kind of a dead draw more often than not. This one is not worth multiple buys. The big problem I have is with the legendaries, you're not going to want 3 Mithril Golems, so you wouldn't buy this more than once. You probably don't even really want one. You probably won't use it. You're just going to have to craft your other Merlins. That's all there is to it. So let's jump into Dragon Craft here. And the golds are Shapeshifting Mage, Wyvern Cavalier, Neptune, Genesis Dragon, Orb Dragon. The only 2 real staples are Genesis Dragon and Wyvern Cavalier. Orb Dragon's pretty bad. Shapeshifting Mage isn't super useful. Fafnir is a good legendary, and Forte is a good legendary. But you got 2 bad golds in this one. Neptune's useful. Fafnir and Forte are both good cards, but it's really hard to find a place for both of them in the same deck. I guess that's what I want to say. This one from Shadowcraft is probably the best value. Every single card in here, Foul Tempest, Phantom Howl, Death's Breath, well, maybe not this one so much, but Ceridwen, Mordecai, Cerberus, and Lord of the Flies are all staples. This is the only one that's like not a super big staple, but all the rest of these are, particularly these 3 spells, are staples in just about every Shadowcraft deck I've seen. Cerberus is a staple, and you want 3 of them in just about every Shadowcraft deck. Lord of the Flies 2 or 3 usually in most Shadowcraft decks. Mordecai's a certain kind of Shadowcraft deck, but he's a staple in those ones. So I think that this is definitely the best value. I think if you bought this one 3 times, that you'd have everything you need for a pretty competitive deck. Moving on to Bloodcraft, we got Revelation, we got Temptress Vampire, we got Righteous Devil, we got Dire Bond, and we have the Vampire Princess. So the deck itself, competitive wise, tries to, like, I feel like, do too many things. Like, you don't need 2 Alucards, especially in like a bat deck. But this isn't a bat deck, yet it has this card, which is in a bat deck. It has a lot of cards that you'd have in a bat deck, but then it has some cards like Dire Bond and Temptress Vampire, which you really wouldn't. So, like I said, these are more like blueprints. It gives you a good taste of everything. Like the Shadowcraft deck, Bloody Mary is great legendary for control Bloodcraft. Queen Vampire is a good legendary as well. So, like Shadowcraft, this has a good, every card in here is good. If you're really into Bloodcraft and you want to tap into every facet of it, then this is definitely a good purchase, much like the Shadowcraft one is a good purchase. There's not really a bad card, a bad gold or legendary in this one. Lastly, we have Havencraft. And this is the worst one, and the reason is because this isn't a bad legendary, but I don't know why they made it the animated one, because this has completely fallen out of the meta, this legendary. It's not bad, it's got a good effect, but it's not being used. And I don't really know any Havencraft decks that would start using it. Maybe the new expansion has changed some things and you'll start seeing this pop up, but doubt it. And this, anytime there's a legendary that's not good is in one of these, it really takes the value down. And so the same problem like I had with the dimension shift Rune Craft, having that Mithril Golem in there. Mithril Golem is still, I would say, more useful than this card in most Havencraft decks, so it's always a disappointing feature. But what makes this extra disappointing is cards like this, Kaguya, Incandescent Dragon, Holy Sentinel. None of these are terrible, but they're not widely used, I guess. I think that most people have found that there are better cards that they could put in their deck. Demis Decree is a staple, and Garud is a staple, but mostly in Stormhaven, and there's so many different Haven decks. So that's kind of a problem if you're buying this. This legendary it's good. I have one in my Stormhaven deck, but I only have one. I don't really see a point to having 2 or 3 of them in most decks. So this one just does not feel worth it to me. It feels like you're getting too many things that you won't use. You're getting 1, 2, 3 golds and 1 legendary that you're probably not going to use too much. So I would probably, this is the only one that I would probably skip. So that's my take on all of these. Overall, I think that they're worth it because 500 crystals is 5 packs, and you're not going to get 5 golds and 2 legendaries in 5 packs. It's going to take a lot more than that. If you're a new player, even with the new expansion that came out, this will still give you a better base than if you just bought all new expansion cards, because you do need some standard, and you do need some darkness evolved, and you can easily build off of these. As I said, Forestcraft is one that if you bought it 3 times, you'd have a pretty competitive deck, or at least you would have in past seasons. You probably still will now too. And Shadowcraft seems like if you bought 3 of these, you'd have a pretty competitive deck as well. So that's my take on these. I think for new players, they're pretty worth it. For old players, they're interesting. At least for the new artwork in the sleeves. It might even be worth it even if you liquidated every single card in here because you already had them all. I don't know exactly how many vials that would be. I'd probably have to calculate that, but it seems like that might even be worth the 500 crystals just to buy all these one time, and then you get, an animated card and a new sleeve and an emblem. So even that might be worth it. So that's what I think. I think overall these are worth it, although not very competitive, and I bought one so far and I'm contemplating buying the rest. So yeah, that's what I think. I hope it was useful for people.